We're digesting still Labor's first budget of this term and the first budget ever of Jim Chalmers. It did contain some pretty dire predictions, including on energy and gas prices. Joining me live, Nationals leader David Littleproud for more on this. Your take on the budget? I mean, the issue is everyone knows cost of living, but it's kind of hard to solve right now. Otherwise, you make the issue worse because inflation is the problem.
Yeah, but what this budget did was create a second class of citizen for those 30% that live outside a capital city, regional Australians. We copped in the neck not just for cost of living in their energy price and their food and their mortgage rates, but also took away our hope. They took away the infrastructure that actually would go to addressing the structural deficits that we've got. Structural deficits just can't be solved by just cutting expenses and try and find efficiencies. You can also address structural efficiencies with giving the Australian people the tools they need. The tools that will create the wealth, that will pay the tax receipts that are required. And to take that away from regional Australia is what they've done, nearly $10 billion worth of infrastructure spend taken away, and particularly for dams. And dams don't just grow the country, they mitigate for flood. But then the big kicker for us that just broke the hearts of regional Australians, young families in particular, is while we welcome the $4.7 billion investment in childcare, they're going to give subsidies to families of $22,500 in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and they probably need it because the cost of living out there is different to what it is in regional areas. But they didn't create one new childcare place in regional rural Australia. And our issue is not affordability, it's accessibility. And you've got families that want to go back to work, and it mightn't be for $300,000. They just want to go and get a job for $80,000, $90,000. So their hope, their vision of bringing their families up has been stripped away from them. And I went to the Job Summit. I was constructive. I sat there and warned them about spending it all on affordability and not on accessibility in regional areas. And you would have thought out of $4.7 billion, you might have made a few places for regional Australians and young families out there that'll just lose hope.
A lot of this budget was what Labor inherited. Isn't this childcare desert what they inherited?
Well, what we put in place as part of the Nationals and what we were able to secure under the Regional Accelerator program was actually a fund to start building capacity for childcare places in regional rural areas. So there was a designated fund within the Regional Accelerator program.
Which was when?
So that was in the budget. So that was to create and to help them to partner with
it took a long year for your government to do something about it.
Exactly.
Did that frustrate you at the time? Was that too long?
Exactly, it was. But we, as Nationals, we continued to articulate that this was an issue that needed to be solved in regional rural Australia, and we secured those funds. And that was a practical way to work with childcare centres to try and expand and to partner with them. But there's also some practical measures that they should be looking at.
We've got various funds out there that Labor's, for example, scrapped community development and building better regions, but it's brought in growing regions program, regional precincts and so on. So
that's a bit of loose change, Tom. Let's be honest.
It's $1 billion.
Well, there's about $10 billion worth of funds.
But I'm just saying, have you sort of clarified whether any of these funds could cover that sort of thing?
This will be at the discretion of the government. Now, you would have thought that if it was as empowered and worried about getting regional women back to work as they were of anyone else, they would have already petitioned off that money to look after and to give hope.
Dams, isn't it a bit of a problem there that your former leader Barnaby Joyce extracted a price for net zero, and so these weren't all merit-based projects?
Oh, with respect, they were, and they've been kicked around and kicked to death for decades, these projects, and many have had multiple EISs and business cases put there. And what's happened is they've taken away Hells Gate, they've taken away Urana Dam, they've taken away Emu Swamp Dam, and effectively said, you can't have that. But we won't do a business case. And if you want to be serious about this, they haven't done a business case, haven't put through Infrastructure Australia the $2.2 billion to run a rail line around Melbourne to help Dan Andrews.
And that point's been made all week by the coalition. It's a fair enough one.
Well, you want to throw mud, let's dance.
I'm not throwing mud. We'll ask that of the minister when I get her on. But I'm just asking about business cases for the dams you're talking about.
They're there, Tom. In fact, Emu Swamp, they were ready to burn diesel. And in fact, we had put all the money up, and Anastasia Palaszczuk is just as complicit in this. Anastasia Palaszczuk has had the money promised to her to go and burn the diesel and dig the holes.
But all of those projects would get back more than $1 that they would spend.
Yeah, and Tom, this is the thing is you've got to appreciate with dams and some of these assessments, and Infrastructure Australia, God bless them, but I don't think they sometimes live in the real world. there's no dam that's lasted less than 20 years, and they're looking for paybacks on 20, 30 years. Most of our dams last for well beyond that.
So the business case falls short, but you think they're doing it in the wrong way. That's your argument on that.
Well, not just that. I think you'll find most of these business cases do stack up.
Not all. That implies not all of them.
Well, the Hell's Gate hadn't been done, so that was a commitment around making sure that the business case did stack up. But with respect to Urana, I'm sorry, there was. With respect to Emu Swamp, there was. With respect to HIPCO, the Hewenden irrigation project, it was. It was done and dusted. So why do you take that away? And the only one they're going to fix up is Paradise, and because that's Anastasia's cluster. She stuffed that dam, and now the only reason that they're getting money for that is to fix her mistake.
That was an election commitment made by Labor as well, so they kept to that. I want to ask you about energy prices. What should the government be looking at here? Maybe just a rebate, gas and electricity? What's the solution? Because these are going through the roof.
Well, some of this is about the very strong signals that Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese sent to the market. He's effectively said, if you run a coal-fired power station, shut it now because we're going to invest in renewables, and they are coming.
So well, hang on. So just on that, there is nothing Labor's done yet that has pushed these prices up. There's nothing exiting the market during the time of the... We're talking about a power increase that's just come in July, for example, of 20%, when Labor had been in office for 2 months. That's not Labor's fault.
No, well, I'll finish the rest of the answer. That's normally what's happened. Also, there's been big issues around the gas. Gas in supplementing what was happening because the coal had been pulled down because basically they're saying we're getting out. But the gas and increasing the supply of gas and the fact that Chris Bowen won't talk to our gas companies, they're more than happy to continue to put more supply into domestic. And I've got to say, the challenge we've had is the states. The states in giving that. And I've got to say, credit where credit's due. Queensland, about 4 to 5 years ago, started to increase the number of tenements that they were approving that were for domestic supply. And this is where, if the states continue to do that, the gas companies are ready to drill. In fact, they're drilling. But you know what this government's done in this budget? They've taken away a grant of $30-odd million to develop a new basin in the Ada Vale Cooper that would put more petajoules into the system.
Okay.
So, and also it's about getting on with the job that we had said of building and fixing the capacity constraints, the physical capacity constraints of getting more gas down south rather than going out on a pool.
Yeah, but so on this, there's some drastic solutions being looked at, maybe a cap, for example, on prices, in particular on gas, because we know this is a fuel stock essentially for a lot of businesses. Is it getting that drastic? Is that fair enough to be looking at that?
Well, this is where, I mean, if you've got a relationship as we had with the gas companies in trying to work collaboratively with them and accelerating those developments in making sure we get...
They can't happen overnight. We're talking about what happens now in January.
Tom, that's exactly right. You're going back to saying, well, this is something they inherited. Well, from the very first moment, and as soon as I was elected, I remember being interviewed by a number of your colleagues saying, well, this isn't their problem, but they wouldn't pick up the phone to the gas companies and say, let's solve it now. They should have started on the 22nd of May in talking to the gas companies.
Okay, so where do you sit on the gas?
Chris Bowen doesn't like gas.
Where do you sit on
he's
cap on prices?
Well, obviously, we have to make sure that we've got affordable energy, and this is the reckless pace that this mob's going at. We have sovereignty of all our resources here. We're not like Europe. We shouldn't be compared to Europe. We own our resources here, and this is where you need to actually pick up the phone to gas companies, get the states together and make sure that you can lift that supply, and they can drill.
Right.
And
I think it's worth pointing out, it's been a years-long and sort of annual issue of do we have enough gas?
But did you have the problem when we were there? Because we could work constructively with the gas companies.
It always got solved just in time. Maybe that'll be the case again. We do have...
Well, just in time, I'd have to...
We have got more global pressures right now as well.
Well, hold on, Tom. That war in Ukraine started before the election, with all due respect. So I don't think they can sit there and say this is Vladimir Putin's problem.
Well, just before the election.
They knew very well what was coming.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. I'm sure we'll pick up that conversation on another day. David Littleproud, thanks for your time.
Good to be with you.